We're beginning chapter 23, Anatomy of a Cover-Up. By this point in our investigation, we had proved to our satisfaction that was not mere happenstance that led Mohomed Atta and his Hamburg cadre to Huffman Aviation in Venice. Things were not what they seemed in Florida, and the FBI's full attention seemed to have been engaged, not in investigating what had happened, but in suppressing evidence and even intimidating the witnesses who had seen and heard things that fly in the face of the official story. Everyone from Mohomed Atta's American girlfriend to the Sarasota fire captain who witnessed 4 Arab men attempt to get close to President George W. Bush on the morning of September 11th have been subjected to sometimes ham-handed efforts to keep them silent. This is a demonstrable, provable, and massive federally supervised cover-up in place in Florida. But the real question, of course, is what are they covering up? What is the reason for it? Late in our investigation, we found a piece of it. On at least 3 occasions during the last weeks of his life, terrorist ringleader Mohomed Atta left the jazzier precincts of Miami to travel across the state to the retirement community of Venice. The FBI has said nothing about this. The FBI says Atta didn't live there anymore. The FBI says Atta was 9 months gone. The FBI is lying. Who was Atta meeting with in Venice? We realized that this is one thing the FBI might be eager to hide, because this discovery would lead inexorably to identifying the organization or global network that so clearly smoothed the progress of Atta's Hamburg cadre through America. Sorry, where was I? Fuck. And then we would know just who in the United States was doing business with Osama bin Laden's thugs on this end, the U.S. end, while they were here. That this knowledge could prove highly explosive was driven home to us with a vengeance when, by a lucky accident, we stumbled onto a piece of what the FBI is covering up in Florida, evidence which indicates that whatever the reason for the attack on September 11, 2001, the enemy is still inside the gates. During the months before the 9/11 attack, Mohomed Atta was seen meeting in Venice with flight school owner and international con man Rudy Deckers, who has sworn in testimony before Congress that he never saw Atta again after he left his flight school nearly 9 months earlier in December 2000. This awful truth should have come from our taxpayer-funded federal investigative agency, the FBI, charged with the responsibility of solving the mass murder of 3,000 people on American soil. The conclusion is unmistakable. Somebody is protecting Rudy Deckers. Sadly, it appears the FBI's investigation was slanted, or jimmied, in the same way U.S. intelligence estimates were twisted in the run-up to the war in Iraq, in order to present the American people the idea that it was the next logical step in America's war on terror. For what it's worth, we feel that America's war on terror is wholly unjustified. Lying to the American people in matters pertaining to the deaths of 3,000 people, on the other hand, it is not. We found numerous credible eyewitnesses to Atta's presence in Venice in the final days of the terrorist conspiracy, a rent-a-car agent who took a call from Atta from there, a deli clerk who served him a sub, the owners of a restaurant just a half block from Atta and Marwan's rental home, a cab driver who had him as a fare, Their eyewitness testimony is clear proof of a massive government 9/11 cover-up in Florida. Becky Cover works in the deli of Publix supermarket, a mile from the Venice airport. She says Mohomed Atta was in Venice just 1 week before the attack. On September 11th, I was on the phone with my mother-in-law the time the buildings got hit, she told us. They showed pictures of 3 different guys. Atta was one of them, on TV. And immediately I recognized the faces and told my husband, my God, those are the 3 guys. They were just in the store a week ago. The week before they were in the store, they got subs. The FBI never spoke with her. Tom and Renee Adorna also saw Mohomed Atta in Venice along with Marwan al-Shehi and a third unidentified man just a few weeks before the attack. For reasons which will soon become clear, they have vivid memories of his visit to their eatery a month before the attack. So when reporters showed up the day after September 11th, Renee Adorna says she immediately knew why they were there. Right after the incident happened, we had newspapers come down, and right away I knew what it was about because I remembered the table. Tommy knew, Jeff knew, and we said right away, and they showed us one picture and we knew immediately. Why did she vividly remember Mohomed Atta and Marwan al-Shehi? Because they caused a scene in her restaurant. She told us they were loud, making comments. One was pounding his hand on the table saying, "We're talking $200,000. We have to answer to the family." There were 3 of them, Renee recounted, and they all looked of Egyptian persuasion. Dark skin, dark hair, lots of jewelry. They were dressed in Florida-type shirts, the silk, with the pattern, that kind of thing, and I could have sworn there was a cross. One of the guys had a big cross. The big gaudy gold cross thing, I thought, but I'm not sure now. But I know he had the big watch on. Gold jewelry, expensive watches, and silk shirts. Not exactly a description of Islamic fundamentalists. I thought they were mafia, said Renee. This comment may not be too far afield either. What they were arguing about, the disposition of a loose pile of nearly $250,000, not the proper interpretation of the Quran. She confirmed what numerous other women who we met who knew Atta had said about him. Atta wouldn't talk to her, Renee said. He barely spoke a word to me, but when I'd come over, I'd feel like, geez, what's his problem? Because he had the really mean look on his face all the time, like he was very unhappy. Marwan, as always, served as buffer and go-between. Then there was the other guy, the heavier set guy. He did all the talking with me anyway. He was very outgoing, very pleasant actually. It was Marwan loudly arguing with Atta, we learned to our surprise. The big guy was yelling at the other guy, Atta. I tried to stay away from the table pretty much, and then went and told the owner and the manager, you better watch his table, they're getting a little out of hand. Her husband, Tom, came out front to see what the trouble was about. He, Marwan, was a pretty big guy, he said, and he was doing most of the talking. He kept saying stuff to them about money. We kept hearing about money. The other guy, Atta, and I guess the main guy, but he wasn't saying a word. He just sat there with a look on his face and he didn't say anything. Their restaurant, The Pelican Alley is a block from the rented home which Atta and Marwan supposedly vacated the prior December. Both Tom and Renee Adorna remained surprised that the FBI hadn't bothered to interview them. When we told them they were in good company, they sounded slightly mollified. 2 newspapers came by, said Tom. That was it. And they, the terrorists, were living right down the street, right down the block. But they, the FBI, never came over here to see us. I didn't think it was strange, added Renee. She shrugged. We thought they might want some information, but maybe they had everything they needed. Brad Warwick, owner of Warwick's rental car in Pompano Beach, also knows that Atta was in Venice in the weeks before the attack because he says they used his rental car to drive there. Warwick said he called the FBI on Wednesday afternoon, the day after the attack, after he recognized a picture of Atta on television. They rented 2 cars over 3 different contracts, a total of about 5 weeks. Warwick told us they picked up that car at about closing time, and that one was going to be for 2 weeks. He told me it was going to be for 2 weeks. And he told me he had to go over to the west coast of Florida, and he wanted to know if that would be a problem. While he was gone during those 2 weeks, he called me from Venice. I saw it on the caller ID, stated Warwick. I thought, oh, wonderful. I got a car broke down over on the west coast of Florida. He had called because the service engine light was on. During his questioning by the FBI, Warwick said he learned details of the attack, which the Bureau had chosen not to tell the American people. The FBI told me that Marwan almost missed the building. Marwan was flying 100 miles per hour faster than Atta, they said, and that's why he flew into the buildings deeper, and that's why that building came down first, because there was so much fuel deeper in the building. Their explanation was Atta was very cool, calm, collected, just zeroed in on it, just bingo. And Marwan, on the other hand, 10 years younger, was just scared to death and flew erratic and at the last minute nearly missed the building. This illustrates how little we have been told about what really happened. Brad Warwick's description of Mohomed Atta makes him sound like a perfect spy. He had Allstate insurance, said Warwick. The address on his insurance card matched his driver's license. He was a perfect customer. Mohomed dressed to the nines, said Warwick. Nice pants and shirt, nice clothes, businesslike. He carried a briefcase and he had all the credentials he needed. Credit card, driver's license, and proof of insurance. And he had that. Everything matched. When they returned their last rental car days before the attack, Atta and Marwan exhibited behavior at his rental agency when they showed up to return the car, Warwick said. That seems flatly inconsistent with 2 men on their way to meet their fate. If they were on a suicide mission and they knew they were going to be gone in a couple of days, why did they go to the trouble to return their rental car to us 2 days before? Why didn't they just leave the car at the airport? Why would they care? But not only did Atta and Marwan politely return the car, they engaged in a contest to see who would pay for the rental. On the last contract, we already had a signed credit card slip for Mohomed, Warwick explained, but Marwan said no, don't put it on his credit card. Here, put it on mine. Well, in order to take it on somebody else's credit card for the contract, you have to be on the contract. So that means he had to give us his driver's license, and he had to sign everything. We had to tear up the contract and write out a new one, stated Warwick. He, Marwan, gave us his driver's license, got on the contract. We tore up Mohammed's credit card slip and charged it on Marwan. Warwick paused, looking pained, then said slowly, "Why go to all this trouble? What difference does it make if you are going to be dead in a couple of days?" It was a question he had contemplated often since. We learned that Mohomed Atta was meeting with Terror Flight School owner Rudy Deckers in Venice in the month before he crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into the North Tower of the World Trade Center through a lucky cab ride in Venice taken by a friend and associate who had come down to spend a few weeks assisting the investigation. Luis Batuello, a researcher whose considerable assistance can be seen throughout the pages of this book, was spending an extended fortnight in Venice, when one day she needed to take a cab across town, and that's how she met Bob the cabbie. Her cab driver, who she got to know over the course of a week, was a retired Navy man named Bob Simpson, who had seen duty during the 80s off the coast of Libya, among other places. Simpson comes from a law enforcement background. His father was chief of police in a mid-sized town in California. His brother is a cop, and an uncle works for the DEA. He appears neither mentally disordered nor suicidal. These factors will be important in evaluating his report of what he saw. Bob asked me why I was in town, Lewis explained, telling how their conversation began, and I said to probe around a bit into September 11. I said I was helping someone who was writing a book, Bob said. Atta was here. He was right here in this cab, and so was the other guy, Marwan. And right here is where I would pick them up. He indicated a convenience store. Then across the street, the apartment building where he was dropping her off to come and meet us. We lived there. It was the building we have lived in for over a year in Venice. Atta had been a frequent visitor to our apartment building in downtown Venice, Burgundy Square. I had the FBI come over and question me about them, the cabbie continued. The FBI, had videotape of me with them, Atta and Marwan, taken at Orlando Executive Airport. They said they went through the film on security cameras at the airport and saw my cab number. That's how the FBI knew to contact me, and they let me know that I was just an innocent cab driver even before they asked me questions. That apartment where you're staying, their best friend used to live upstairs on the second floor, stated Simpson. I saw Atta and Al-Shahi there most of the time. I'd be called by their friend who owned the convenience market across the street, or they would call saying, pick them up there at the market. The owner of the convenience store was their best friend here, he said. They were always hanging out together at the store. He knew this, he said, because he would stop his cab and give Atta and Al-Shahi a lift to Huffman. During the time they were students at the flight school, Atta's friend, the man who owned the market across the street, a Kiwi Czech, disappeared immediately after the attack, we learned, and has not been seen since. According to Venice Yellow Cab employees interviewed by the FBI 3 days after the attack, Atta took numerous cab rides in August 2000 to and from Huffman Aviation as well as other locations in Venice. Yellow Cab driver Bob Simpson, who was the only cabbie on the day shift in Venice, stated that on 2 of these occasions, Atta was accompanied by Rudy Deckers. They knew each other well, really well. They were friends. They were going to a nightclub in Sarasota, talking and very sociable with each other. He and Atta were friends, you could tell. Could Simpson be mistaken in his identification? Not likely. He knew Rudy Deckers well, he said, from numerous trips to Huffman Aviation to pick up arriving flight students. He, Deckers, would walk them out to the cab and give me the address to take them to, states Simpson. Then, a lot of times with a new flight student, Rudy would take them over to Sharky's for lunch, and I'd get the call to pick them up. Deckers also regularly used our cabs to do things like go to lunch. Because he usually flew in by helicopter and didn't have a car at the Venice airport, Simpson said he first took Atta and Deckers from Huffman Aviation to James Place, a restaurant in downtown Venice. Then, on a second occasion, he picked the two up from the Pompano Road residence of former Huffman employee Charlie Voss and took them to a Sarasota nightclub Atta is known to have frequented. It was Voss, we recalled, whose home was made available to Atta and Marwan when they arrived in Venice. The yellow cab office manager in Sarasota confirmed that the trips were recorded in the firm's cab logs and said the FBI had also expressed a keen interest in the cab rides Atta had taken with the company's other driver who worked nights. Atta's presence in Venice during final preparations for the attack directly contradicts the FBI's official chronology of his movements in the month before September 11, and totally contradicts numerous statements made by Deckers to the news media. In sworn testimony in front of the House Judiciary Committee in March 2002, Deckers insisted his relationship with the terrorist ringleader had been distant and ended the previous December, 9 months before the attack. Deckers told the hearing about complaints from his staff that Atta and al-Shehi had behavioral problems and that they were not following instructions and that they had bad attitudes. On December 24, 2000, Atta and al-Shehi rented a Warrior N555HA from Huffman Aviation for a flight, the Dutch national stated, telling of his last encounter with Atta. Atta and al-Shehi returned to Huffman Aviation to make final payments on their outstanding bills. Because they were not taking any more flying lessons, they were asked to leave the facility due to their bad attitudes and not being liked by staff and clients alike. Huffman never heard about or from them again until September 11, 2001. Speaking with reporters, he had been more colloquial. They did not socialize with anyone, Deckers said 3 days after the attack. They did not go to the bar with us. That Atta guy was an asshole. On Friday, September 14th, 3 days after the September 11 attack, cab driver Simpson was contacted by the FBI, who questioned him closely about an associate of Atta's, Middle Eastern man, who owned the convenience store across the street from the apartment building where Simpson said he picked him up. Simpson elaborated, "I heard a voice say this is Special Agent Joe Anderson from the FBI calling," remembers Simpson. My heart sort of skipped a beat. Then he said, "Don't worry, you haven't done anything wrong," and asked if I'd seen pictures of the terrorists, and if I had wanted to know if I recognized any. I said yes. I recognize Mohomed Atta, Simpson continued. I'm the day driver for Yellow Cab in Venice, and he was in my cab a bunch of times in August 2001. The night driver had him even more than I did. So the FBI clearly knew, much earlier than we, that Atta was in Venice just before the attack. They were especially interested in a rich Saudi guy that I'd been seen to pick up at the Orlando Executive Airport. They said they already knew that he'd ridden in my cab because they'd gotten my cab number from a surveillance camera there. The FBI agents asked specific and direct questions focused on several trips to the Orlando Executive Airport beginning in December 2000, said Simpson. Simpson told the FBI he had been asked to drive to Orlando by a convenience store owner in Venice, a Middle Eastern man who was an associate of Atta's and who left town shortly after the attack. I took the store owner and when he got to Orlando Executive Airport, we waited together for a flight to come in. Then out comes this really wealthy Saudi businessman, dressed in Armani and shades, as well as his wife, who was wearing traditional Arab clothing. The store owner knew him really well. They hugged, and I am sure he was bringing the store owner a lot of money because you could tell that he had a lot of money. The first thing they wanted to do was go to a good restaurant. So there we were, steak, lobster, everything. The guy had a lot of money. I just know this meeting had to do with this wealthy Saudi businessman bringing him money. After dinner, they proceeded back to the Venice apartment of the convenience store owner, the one where Simpson said he picked up Atta several times. I took them back to Venice and to the apartment where I had to carry in luggage. I guess this wealthy Saudi businessman stayed there at the apartment too. At least that's where I left him. 6 weeks later, Simpson said, he drove the wealthy Saudi's wife back to the Orlando airport, once again, leaving from the convenience store owner's Venice apartment. When he arrived to pick up the fare, he was asked to help carry a chest down to the cab. The chest was so heavy, he said, it took 2 people to carry. The man who helped him carry it down the stairs to the cab says Simpson was Zacharias Mozoi, the so-called 20th hijacker. He was a big bald guy and helped me with the chest. Simpson's identification of Mozoi in Venice added confirmation to the story we'd heard about the second magic Dutch boy, Arnie Kruithoff, being grilled for 2 days at the Sarasota, Florida courthouse about his connections to Mozoi by a Justice Department Assistant Attorney General and top-level officials from the FBI. They're taking depositions from potential witnesses in Mozoi's upcoming trial, so Mozoi was in Venice too. The FBI had said nothing about it. Also of major significance was Simpson's statement that, on several occasions, he drove Mohomed Atta and Marwan al-Shehi from Venice to the Orlando Executive Airport, a considerable distance on one-way trips. This places the 2 men at the same scene where Huffman Aviation's true owner, Wally Hillard, lost a Learjet after it was discovered to have 43 pounds of heroin on board. Hillard also owns a flight school and commuter airline in Orlando as well. Was Mohomed Atta flying out of Orlando Executive Airport for Wally Hillard? Decker's partner in their failed airline venture, Richard Bolick, told a reporter that Decker's proposed flight using students to ride along as co-pilots as a way to save money. The thought that terrorists might have been allowed access to secure airport facilities is chilling, said Bolick. As we've seen in the official chronology of this period, January to April 2001, FBI investigators state they are not sure where Atta and al-Shehi were, suggesting they may have traveled back to Germany, since Atta reportedly received a visitor's visa in Hamburg and re-entered the United States during this time. Once again, we have heard eyewitness testimony which indicates the FBI is lying. So is Rudy Deckers. If Deckers is lying about his relationship with Mohomed Atta, this concerns material evidence in the deaths of 3,000 people. Why hasn't he been arrested? Why have federal authorities as yet done nothing about it? Why is he still walking the streets a free man? When we called a man we know who used to work at something like the CIA to ask him what could have been in that chest that was so heavy, his reply was swift and immediate and seemed to put everything going on in Florida in its proper perspective. Gold, he said firmly. There was gold in that chest. Who deals in heroin? Who deals in gold? Islamic fundamentalists or Islamic spooks? And that's it for chapter 23. Chapter 24, gun runners, drug smuggling, and suitcase salesmen tomorrow.